By the mid-1980s, life with Freddie Mercury had settled into a strange balance between quiet domestic life and overwhelming fame. When Freddie was home at Garden Lodge, the house felt almost peaceful. The world outside might have seen him as a flamboyant rock star, the front man of Queen, but inside those walls he could simply be Freddie. For Jim Hutton, those quieter days were the moments that mattered most. Freddie liked routine more than people expected. Mornings at Garden Lodge often began slowly. The house would wake up gradually, staff moving quietly through the halls, the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Freddie might appear late in the morning, dressed casually, his hair still a little messy. Some days he wandered through the garden, admiring the flowers he loved so much. Other days he would sit at the piano for hours, experimenting with melodies. But these peaceful stretches never lasted forever, because eventually the music would call him back. Being the singer of Queen meant that Freddie's life moved in cycles. There were periods of recording, then promotion, and eventually touring. And touring was something entirely different from life at home. A tour meant weeks, sometimes months away. Huge stadiums, crowds of tens of thousands, bright lights and roaring audiences, and long absences. For Jim, the tours were the hardest part of their relationship. Freddie had spent years building his career before Jim entered his life, and the machine of the band never truly stopped. When preparation began for another tour, the atmosphere at Garden Lodge changed. The house became busier. Managers called constantly. Schedules appeared everywhere, rehearsals, flights, interviews. Freddie would spend more and more time away from home. Rehearsal for Magic Tour were especially intense. By this point, Queen had already become one of the biggest rock bands in the world. Fans expected something spectacular. Freddie intended to deliver exactly that. The rehearsals often lasted all day. Freddie would leave Garden Lodge early, sometimes before Jim was even fully awake. He might return late at night, exhausted but energized at the same time. Jim quickly learned something about Freddie during those weeks when Freddie was preparing for a tour. His focus became almost absolute. Music came first, not because he cared less about the people around him, but because performing was about part of who he was. On stage, he became a completely different person, larger than life. Jim saw only glimpses of that transformation at home. Sometimes Freddie would practice gestures in front of mirrors, experimenting with movements he might use during concerts. Other times he sang fragments of songs while walking through the house. One evening Jim asked him, half joking, "Do you ever stop working?" Freddie grinned. "Darling, when you have 80,000 people waiting for you to sing, you don't walk on stage unprepared." The Magic Tour was designed to be enormous. Massive stadium shows across Europe, huge production setups, elaborate lighting system, towers of speakers, trucks carrying equipment from city to city. It was a traveling city built around music. For the band, Freddie, Brian May, Roger Taylor, and John Deacon, touring meant constant movement. One night they might perform in London. The next week they could be in Germany, then France, then Spain. For fans, it was an unforgettable experience. Stadiums filled with people singing every word. But for Jim, watching the tour begin meant something else entirely. It meant Freddie would be gone. Freddie never liked dramatic goodbyes. When the day came for him to leave for the tour, he kept things simple. Suitcases would be packed. Cars waited outside the gates of Garden Lodge. Sometimes Freddie moved quickly through the house, checking that he hadn't forgotten anything. Other times he seemed strangely quiet. Before leaving, he often walked through the garden one last time. Jim usually walked with him. The conversations during those moments were never very long. Freddie might pause near the flowers and say something simple like, Look after everything while I'm away? Jim would nod. I always do. Freddie smiled. I know. Then he would leave, and suddenly the house felt far too large. When Freddie was away, Garden Lodge became a completely different place. The energy disappeared. The rooms felt quieter. Jim remained there, looking after the house and the garden. Freddie trusted him with the property completely. The garden in particular became Jim's responsibility. Freddie loved flowers, roses especially, and expected them to be perfect when he returned. Jim spent hours outside, trimming plants, watering beds, and keeping the garden exactly the way Freddie liked it. In many ways, the garden became a symbol of waiting. While Freddie performed in enormous stadiums filled with cheering fans, Jim lived a calmer, slower life back in London. But the distance didn't mean silence. Freddie made sure of that. Phones rang often during the tours. Sometimes Freddie called late at night after a concert. The line might crackle slightly as the connection traveled across countries. Jim could sometimes hear noise in the background, crew members, laughter, movement. Freddie's voice sounded energized. Guess what tonight's crowd did? He would say. What? They sang louder than I did. Jim laughed. That's hard to believe. Freddie loved telling stories from the road. Crowds chanting, fans throwing flowers on stage, moments when the entire stadium seemed to move as one giant wave of sound. Even though Jim wasn't there, Freddie tried to bring those experiences home through his stories. Sometimes the conversations were short, other times they lasted a long time. But Freddie always called. Despite the excitement, touring was exhausting. Long flights, late nights, endless interviews, hotel rooms that all started to look the same. Freddie rarely complained about it, but Jim could hear the fatigue creeping into his voice during some calls. After weeks on the road, even the greatest performers in the world could feel worn down. One evening Freddie admitted quietly with the phone, I can't wait to get home. Jim understood. Freddie loved performing, but he also loved having a place where he could escape the chaos of fame. Garden Lodge was that place, and Jim was part of what made it feel like home. Sometimes newspapers carried photographs of the concerts. Jim would see images of Freddie on stage in front of enormous crowds. Microphone raised, arms spread wide, thousands of fans cheering. It almost felt like looking at two different people. The Freddie on stage looked like a rock god. The Fred at home was the man who joked in the kitchen, walked through the gardens in slippers, and argued about which flowers should be planted next. Jim understood something many fans never saw. Behind the superstar was simply a human being who needed quiet, comfort, and loyalty. Among all the concerts during the Magic Tour, the performance at Wembley Stadium were the most famous. Two massive nights, more than 70,000 fans each evening. For Freddie, performing at Wembley felt like standing at the center of the musical world. When Jim later heard the stories, Freddie described the atmosphere with excitement. The entire stadium was singing, he said. Every single word. Moments like that reminded Freddie why he had chosen this life. Music connected him to people in ways few experiences could match. Back in London, Jim kept track of the tour through phone calls and occasional news reports. He learned the rhythm of the schedule. Concert, travel, another concert, another city. But every tour eventually reaches its final show. When the day came, Freddie sounded relieved. Almost finished, he told Jim over the phone. Good, Jim replied. The roses are waiting for you. Freddie laughed. You better have kept them alive. I did. I know I could trust you. The day Freddie returned to Garden Lodge always felt special. The house came alive again. Cars arrived, suitcases appeared in the hallway. Freddie moved through the rooms as if reconnecting with everything he had missed. After weeks surrounded by crowds and noise, the quiet felt comforting. Sometimes he walked straight into the garden. He would study the flowers carefully, examining the roses like a proud owner inspecting a treasured collection. Then he would turn toward Jim. "Not bad," Freddie would say with a smile. That was his version of praise. Touring never truly disappeared from Freddie's life. Music remained central to everything he did, but the pattern became familiar. Freddie would leave, Jim would wait, then Freddie would return home again. Distance tested the relationship, but it also strengthened it. Each separation reminded them how important their time together was. For Freddie, the world of stadiums and fans would always exist, but Garden Lodge and the quiet life he shared with Jim gave him something the stage never could. A place where he didn't need to be a legend, a place where he would simply be Freddie. And after every tour, no matter how far he traveled, that was the place he wanted to return to.